fully rebooted everything yet, but for Disney Month 2017, I'll give you kind of an insight to what I have planned for this rebooted style. Consider this a pilot for what's to come. So due to the fact that this is Disney Month, let's make the pilot for a review series reboot be a reboot. Let's talk the new DuckTales 2017. For those who have been under a rock in the past, say, ever, DuckTales was a show that ran from 1987 to 1990 about three ducks, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, all played by Russie Taylor, nephews of one Scrooge McDuck, played by Alan Young. The show tended to be about the adventures of Scrooge and family, as Scrooge practically fought his way to stay as the richest duck in the world, either protecting his wealth or just finding new wealth altogether. It was an episodic show, so every week there would be some new adventure for the kids to watch. The show was cancelled after 4 seasons, though, because I guess that's a good runtime for the series. The DuckTales name then went silent on television, you know, as you do, but still holding a name in the comic book realm, but eventually got a reboot earlier this year with a massive cast behind it. Given all of the other reboots that have come out recently on the likes of Cartoon Network and how unsatisfying those get called on a regular basis, you would think that people would hate this idea, right? Nah, people were ecstatic over it, going so far to tell Cartoon Network this is how it's done when just the opening was released. So, is it worth the hype? Well, let's find out. After all, it can't be that long. It was a TV movie 43 minutes long. Fuck. So the episode starts on a boat where we meet up with Donald Duck, played by Tony Anselmo, as he's preparing for a job offer. But after realizing he can't leave his nephews alone, he takes them to McDuck Manor, where they'll stay while he's gone. And there's certainly an interesting dynamic we see right out of the gate with Donald and Scrooge here, being that they seem to have a history with each other. Keep this in mind as we go on. So the boys annoy Scrooge, played by David Tennant, and get locked into a small room to get out of Scrooge's hair, which they promptly break out of and then get caught by a new friend, Webby Vanderclap, played by Kate McCuddy, who leads them through the vents where Dewey hears that Scrooge doesn't want a family around. We then arrive to a room called the Wing of Secrets, and can I just say that Webby quickly became a character that I enjoy? She's very eccentric, possibly due to the fact that she was locked away for so long. Her mother is very overprotective, so it makes sense she would have to have found some hobby, so I guess stalking the Scrooge McDuck family tree works, I guess. It's a character that's easily more interesting than her 1980s counterpart. Back to the story, the boys look through the room, find a picture with Donald Duck on it, and deem Scrooge a fraud because Donald is really boring. I'm not making that up. It's there that we find out that Donald was Scrooge McDuck's sidekick, and a handful of Scrooge's adventures come back to haunt the manor, and as quickly as they show up, they leave due to a quick action sequence from Scrooge himself. I mean, we have to introduce the show's premise in some way. But that said, I'm becoming skeptical, as we're 15 minutes into a 43-minute runtime, and the main story hasn't even really started yet. By now we kinda have an idea of what the story is going to be, given that there's a current in the ocean that'll lead to Atlantis, but outside of a conversation with Scrooge and Mrs. Beakley, played by, I would have no idea how to pronounce that name, we haven't seen anything really play off that. Anyway, Scrooge gets upset at the kids and unleashes a great evil upon his money that again gets stopped as quickly as it shows up. And he warms up to the kids fairly quickly due to his nostalgic rush of nature and decides to take the kids to go find Atlantis. Meanwhile, we have had several moments of comic relief from Donald Duck hunting for a job, and it's at this point he gets one from our antagonist for the next 22 minutes. Flint Hart Blomgold, played by Keith Ferguson. This is the end of what I deem to be part 1, considering this was about the end of a normal 22-minute television episode, and as far as I'm concerned, its weak start is certainly something that I need to talk about. Considering this whole episode is a 43-minute special, I really don't feel as if they do enough with that runtime, as this whole first half could have just been written off as some pilot episode and didn't need to be connected that much to the overall story together. At most, we would miss the conversation with Scrooge McDuck and Mrs. Beakley, but even then, that's not saying much. If it was supposed to be a pilot episode tacked on to the beginning of that would explain a bit. It'd be very unfocused and bare bones, but it would explain why this feels disjointed from the second half of the 43-minute runtime. But alas, this is how they start their 43-minute runtime, so the disjointed nature is just that. Disjointed. It barely connects to the rest of the episode. Well, let's get back on track to show how part 2 plays out. It starts with, well, the show's intro that we'll see for the rest of the series. That's an interesting way to start. Put it in the middle of the pilot, and before anyone says anything, yes, this is shoved in the middle. It was an hour-long pilot, not actually a 2-parter, so this is jarring. Interesting, but jarring. But okay, let's talk about the theme song everyone was hyping up so much and compare it to the 1980s theme song because, Well, we can't not compare the two, as this is literally just a cover of the original by Mark Mueller, sang by Jeff Pescetto. Jeff's version is the famous earworm, the one that everyone thinks of when they think of the name DuckTales. As a song, its instrumentals aren't very interesting, but Jeff himself was very into his singing. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I would certainly listen to this theme song just to hear a guy happily sing about ducks. It was certainly something kids would be grabbed into in the 80s, considering DuckTales wasn't a show made purely for the sake of selling toys, much like other shows at the time. This would certainly be the show's strong suit. Felicia Barton sings the 2017 version, and unlike Jeff, Felicia actually has a bit of story behind her, going back to the season 8 of American Idol, where she got shot down in auditions, but still made the top 36 because one of the contestants was trying to rig the show in their favor. That said, while Felicia isn't bad, as a singer, she barely holds a candle to Jeff's cheesy 80s upbeat karaoke. That said, the instrumentals are amazing, bringing its own energy into the mix and certainly enhances the overall feel of the opening as a whole, outshining the 80s pop instrumentals. Hell, I'd argue it's enough to make the Marco Diaz cover at least ironically good.
Life is like a hurricane here in Duckburg. Race cars, lasers, aeroplanes, it's a duck blur.
Which do I think is better? Don't ask me that, I can't decide. Back to the actual story itself, we hear Glomgold's plan is to also go to Atlantis for some lost treasure, as Donald calls in to check with Scrooge and friends, who are already on their way. Some silly banter happens and Dewey changes the map so they get there faster, blissfully unaware that they put them in danger. Afterwards, they take a stop at a nearby tanker to use the restroom. I'm not making this up, and Glomgold devises a plan to follow them, allow them to do the early work, and just swipe the jewel last second. We then get to the first death trap of Atlantis. Lasers! That set off flamethrowers. You have my attention, show, go for it. What follows is only described as a classic slapstick joke, where Donald is doing everything in his power to prevent Dewey from practically dying, and Dewey is just dancing the night away, not caring in the slightest that every laser is touching him. Dewey and Scrooge get into a fight, and the bridge collapses, causing the others to have to find another way around. Meanwhile, Glomgold finds out that Donald found a shortcut and pushes on to steal the treasure, and successfully gets there before Scrooge. The two then get to the treasure room to find out that Glomgold has Donald, and go to stop him, where Donald chews out Scrooge and then becomes a hostage. Oops. They take the jewel and trap the three in the treasure room and set off a trap that begins flooding it. Now, here's where my cynical side starts asking questions. Because wasn't there another way that Glomgold came in, meaning the door that was closed off is not the only way in? Couldn't they escape just going that way? The writing seems off, but I guess I won't let it get me too much. Donald tries everything in his power to plug the holes in the walls and start yelling at Scrooge. And Dewey talks him out of it because they realize the true jewel of Atlantis is on the ceiling, or in this case, the floor, as everything is upside down in Atlantis. And the second they take it, the trap reverses, leaving the room empty. I'm continuing to notice patterns here, and they're not good ones. Glomgold escapes and fires missiles at Atlantis, trying to blow it up, killing Scrooge and his other employees in the process, but they get out, humiliate Glomgold, and live happily ever after. So what did I think? It's alright. Like, I won't say it's the best reboot ever and any other reboot should kiss its feet after, but I certainly see a charm in it. The characters are certainly something to enjoy, the animation is beautiful, and its humor is pretty spot on. But if this is how the writing is going to be, maybe it won't be as great in that department, as a lot of what was shown to me in this 40-minute special was a bunch of conflicts that immediately got resolved as quickly as they showed up. It's certainly not the worst I've seen as far as storytelling goes, and maybe the more the show goes on, a lot of those kinks in the writing will be ironed out. But they were putting a lot into one thing at a time, and I don't think that really worked out in their favor for first impression. I guess what I'm trying to say is it's good, but it could be a lot better in the writing department. But hey, don't take my word for it. That's only my view. I suggest you go out yourselves and watch it, get your own opinion. Whether you agree or disagree, I hope you enjoyed. As for me, I've got more of a backlog of reviews to fill up before the start of the next year, so I'll see you then. This is Susie Doodle the Review Gal, aka Doodletones 2, and I'll see you next time.